mit Gebet anfangen.
Dear Heavenly Father,
Lieber himmlischer Vater,
I thank you for this day that we can now gather here again together.
ich danke dir für diesen Tag und dass wir uns jetzt hier wieder zusammenkommen können.
And I ask for your presence, that you be with us now during this study.
Und ich bitte jetzt um deine Gegenwart während dieses Studiums.
Please help all of us to be attentive and to listen to your word.
So, bitte hilft uns alle aufmerksam zu sein und dass wir dein Wort verstehen.
And I pray that you might also help Lawrence and Scott to translate your word the right way.
Und ich bete, dass du auch Bruder Lorenz segnest und die Übersetzung, dass es auch richtig rüberkommt.
And I pray that you bless us now and that you forgive us your sins before you.
Und ich bete, dass du uns jetzt segnest und unseren Sünden vergibst.
In Jesus' name, amen.
In Jesu Namen. Amen.
Okay. So, good evening.
So, guten Abend.
And this evening we will look at a thought that is also, I can see it, but it's still a little bit dim, okay?
Und heute Abend werden wir eine Gedanke anschauen. Also, ich glaube, ich kann das zwar sehen, aber es ist immer noch etwas unklar.
But maybe the Lord will open it up as we go along.
Aber vielleicht wird der Herr das uns auftun, während wir es anschauen.
Okay, so let's go to Psalms 77.
So, lasst uns in unseren Bibeln zum Psalmen 77 gehen.
And let's read verse 13.
Und lass uns Vers 13 lesen.
It says, Thy way, O God, is in the sanctuary. Who is so great a God as our God? Okay, so we are well acquainted with this verse.
Also, wir sind alle mit diesem Vers vertraut.
So God's way is in the sanctuary. Right?
Gottes Wege sind im Heiligtum.
And this is what we want to look at this evening.
Und das ist das, was wir heute Abend anschauen möchten.
Because I'm totally positive, okay, because what did we, I don't know if anybody can remember, but what was the theme that we looked at last time, when my last evening study 2 days ago?
Also ich weiß nicht, ob ihr daran erinnern könnt, aber meine letzte Abendstudium vor 2 Tagen, was war der Thema? Cherubim, das Heiligtum.
Yes, okay. But we looked especially at Daniel 8:13 and Daniel 8:14, right?
Aber wir haben ganz besonders Daniel 8,13 und Daniel 8,14 angeschaut.
Yes. How long? And then we looked at the close link between what's happened in heaven and on earth, right?
Also wie lange, und wir haben die besondere Verbindung, wie Himmel und Erde sehr eng miteinander sind.
Because how long was the daily in the transgression of desolation to tread down God's people, and the heavenly response was, until 2300 days, then the sanctuary shall be cleansed. Right?
Die Frage war, wie lange soll das tägliche und das Übertreten der Verwüstung Gottes Volk und das Heiligtum niedertreten? Und der Antwort war 2300 Tage, dann wird das Heiligtum gereinigt.
Yes, this heavenly response.
Das war das himmlische Erwiderung.
Yeah. So we looked at how closely heaven is connected with the things going on earth, and the solution is the blotting out of sin, right?
Also wir haben angeschaut, wie sehr eng die Verbindung ist mit das, was im Himmel ausspielt und das auf Erde ausspielt. Und der Antwort war das Austilgen der Sünde.
And what I'm positive is that the Lord wants to really, because up till now we more or less we studied the sanctuary, and then we also studied Daniel 11, and it's more separate themes at the moment. though we see some links, but they are still so. We don't see the close connection yet. Okay.
Also wir haben zwar Daniel 11 studiert und wir haben das Heiligtum studiert und ich bin mir sicher, dass die Dinge sehr eng verbunden sind, aber wir sehen die Verbindung vielleicht nicht so sehr jetzt.
But I'm positive that the Lord wants to bring these two themes together.
Aber ich bin mir sicher, dass der Herr diese beiden Sachen zusammenbringen möchte.
And that we can clearly see the relation between what's going on in the sanctuary and then also Daniel 11, the king between the fight between the north and the south. Okay.
Dass wir klar sehen können, das was im Heiligtum abgeht und der Kampf zwischen König des Nordens, König des Südens, Daniel 11,
I mean, we saw already how the cherubims, they are connected with the wheels within the wheels, right? They are connected with setting up kings and taking down kings.
Also
Okay.
wir haben gesehen, die Cherubim, diese Rädern, dass sie damit verbunden sind mit das Aufstellen und Absetzen von Königen.
But I think it's like it will be like one complete message, really, one solid message where all these themes come together.
Aber ich bin überzeugt, dass es eine gesamte einzelne Botschaft geben wird, wo all diese Themen zusammenkommen und zusammengefügt werden.
And I think also this topic tonight will link these two things more closely together. Okay.
Und mein Glaube ist es, dass der Thema heute Abend werden diese beiden Dinge noch näher zusammenbringen.
Okay, because we saw God's way is in the sanctuary, right?
Wir eben gelesen haben, dass Gottes Weg im Heiligtum ist.
Okay, now let's go to Psalm 73.
So, jetzt zu Psalm 73.
Because this is a psalm of Asaph, and he also realized the same that David realized in Psalm 77.
Das ist ein Psalm von Asaph und der bemerkte dasselbe wie Daniel im Psalm 77.
Okay, it says in verse 1,
Und Vers 1.
Truly God is good to Israel, even to such as are of a clean heart. But as for me, my feet were almost gone, my steps had well nigh slipped. For I was envious of the foolish, when I saw the prosperity of the wicked. For there are no bands in their death, but their strength is firm. They are not in trouble as other men, neither are they plagued like other men. Therefore pride compasseth them about as a chain, violence covereth them as a garment. Their eyes stand out with fatness, they have more than heart could wish. They are corrupt and speak wickedly concerning oppression. They speak loftily. They set their mouth against the heavens, and their tongue walketh through the earth. So you can also see this externally at the moment, right?
Dies können wir gerade jetzt extern sehen.
The wicked, they just do everything they want at the moment. They get away with it.
So, die Bösen, die tun das, was sie wollen gerade zur Zeit und sie kommen davon auch noch.
Okay. Therefore his people return hither, and waters of full cup are run out to them. And they say, How doth God know? And is there knowledge in the Most High? Behold, these are the ungodly who prosper in the world. They increase in riches. Verily I have cleansed my heart in vain, and washed my hands in innocency. For all the day long have I been plagued, and chastened every morning. If I say I will speak thus, behold, I should offend against the generation of thy children. When I thought to know this, it was too painful for me, until I went into the sanctuary of God. Then understood I their end. So,
Bis Vers 17.
what did Asaph do?
So, was tat Asaph?
He went into the sanctuary, right?
Ging ins Heiligtum.
So, like David, he realized, Thy way, O God, is in the sanctuary.
So
right?
wie David hat erkannt, dass dein Weg, o Herr, ist im Heiligtum.
And what did he see in the sanctuary?
Und was sah im Heiligtum?
Yes, he saw the judgment, right?
Sah das Gericht.
He saw the end of the wicked.
Sah
okay?
das Ende der Bösen.
And where on our line is the end?
Und wo auf unserer Linie ist der Ende? Die Ende.
Yes, the 10, right?
Die 10, richtig?
So he basically saw what is going on in the 10. Okay?
Sah, was da in 10 sich
Yeah.
ausspielt.
Amen.
Verstand das Gericht.
Who else saw what was going on in the sanctuary? here in the 10? Isaiah, right?
Wer hat noch gesehen, was hier im Heiligtum im 10 gesehen
Yes.
hat? Es war Jesaja,
Amen. And it's the stalk, right?
der Storch.
So just keep your finger here. Let's go to Jeremiah 8.
So, haltet den Platz hier in den Psalmen und geht zu Jeremia 8.
Yes. Jeremiah 8, verse 7.
Jeremia 8 und Vers 7.
It says, Yea, the stork in the heaven knoweth her appointed times, and the turtle and the crane and the swallow observe the time of their coming, but my people know not the judgment of the Lord. Okay, so the appointed times, we studied this. Where are the appointed times?
So, die
In this
bestimmten
context?
Zeiten in diesem Zusammenhang, wo sind sie?
This period of
Yes, these two appointed times, right?
Dies zwei bestimmte Zeiten.
We shared this in the online seminar.
Das Online-Seminar haben wir das ausgelegt.
Okay, so it's the time of the judgment, right?
Das ist der Zeit des Gerichts.
And God's people don't understand this judgment here as they should.
Und
Okay.
Gottes Volk verstehen dieses Gericht hier nicht, wie sie es sollten,
As it says here.
so wie es hier sagt.
But Asaph is one, when we go back to Psalm 73,
Aber wenn-
Asaph is one who now looks into it and he starts understanding it.
Wenn wir zurück zu Psalm 73 gehen, Asaph, der ist einer, der da hineinschaut und es versteht.
Okay, so and this is actually, when you understand it, it's something comforting for you, okay?
Und wenn du das verstehst, das ist was Tröstendes für
Because
uns.
now you see that the Lord makes a difference between the just and the wicked, okay?
Weil jetzt können wir sehen, dass der Herr eine Unterscheidung macht zwischen die Gerechten und die Bösen.
Keep your finger here, let's go to Malachi.
Halte den Platz weiterhin hier und geht zu Malachi,
Chapter 3.
Kapitel 3.
And verse 18. Yes,
Vers 18.
you can see the principle. Okay. It says, Then shall ye return and discern between the righteous and the wicked, between him that serveth God and him that serveth him not. And this is when, verse 17, this is when he makes up his jewels.
Vers
Okay.
17 auch, das ist, wenn er seinen Juwelen.
It says,
Yeah,
And they shall be mine, saith the Lord of hosts, in that day when I make up my jewels, and I will spare them as a man spareth his own son that serveth him. So where's the time that he makes up his jewels?
So, wo ist der Zeit, wo er seine Juwelen sammelt?
What are his jewels?
Was sind erstmal seine Juwelen?
those with the truth in them.
Yes, exactly.
So, diejenigen mit der Sache oder mit der Wahrheit in sich.
So, and where is the Lord separating the precious from the vile, the wicked from the righteous?
Und wo trennt der Herr das Kostbare von das Abtrünnige und von den Gerechten und Ungerechten?
Parable of the talents. This comes in. He reckons with them in the time
Yes.
of just.
So, Gleichnis der Talenten. Er kommt hinein und
And come to the end of it and then separates the two.
Yes.
am Ende trennt er die beiden.
Or it's in the time of harvest, right?
Es ist in der Zeit der Ernte.
So this is the time of the harvest here, right?
Hier ist der Zeit der Ernte.
It's the time of the latter rain, it's the time of the harvest, it's the time of the end,
Es ist
time
Zeit
of the
des
judgment. Yes.
Spätregens, Zeit der Ernte,
Times of
Zeit des
refreshing.
Ende, Zeit des Gerichts,
Yes, times of refreshing.
die Zeiten der Erquickung.
Yes, we understand all these times.
Es ist all diese Zeiten.
And according to Esther chapter 1,
Gemäß Esther Kapitel 1.
maybe let's go there also.
Lasst uns dahin.
Esther chapter 1. Verse 13.
Vers 13.
Esther 1 verse 13. Then the king said to the wise men, which knew what?
The times.
So, was
Den-
wussten sie?
Yes, they knew the times, right?
Sie kannten die Zeiten.
For so was the king's manner toward all that knew law and
Judgment.
judgment. Okay? So the wise men are those that understand the time of the harvest, that understand the time of the end, that understand the time of the latter rain, all these times, right?
Die Weisen sind die, die die Zeit der Ernte, Zeit des Spätregens, Zeit der, ja, all diese Zeiten erkennen.
And they understand the appointed times.
Sie
Okay?
verstehen die bestimmte Zeiten.
And that appointed times was linked to what in Jeremiah 8?
Und die bestimmte Zeiten in Jeremia 8 war mit was verbunden?
Judgment.
With the judgment, right?
Der Gericht.
Okay, so therefore they understand the judgment, and therefore they can now here judge, because it says the new law in judgment. Okay.
Weil sie den Gericht verstehen, dann können sie hier richten, weil es steht hier, dass sie Gesetz und das Gericht verstanden.
Yes? I really can follow. Okay, good. So now let's go back to Psalm 73.
Zurück zur Psalm 73.
So Asaph in verse 17, he went into the sanctuary of God and then he understood the end. So
Asaph in Vers 17, er ging in das Heiligtum des Herrn und dann verstand er deren Ende, also das Ende der Bösen.
yeah, so he had the same experience as Isaiah and all these other prophets. He had basically this appearance of Christ. Okay.
Er hat dieselbe Erfahrung wie Jesaja und all diese anderen Propheten, er hat diese Gesicht oder diese Erscheinung von Jesus gesehen.
Okay, and in the sanctuary you see the end of the wicked.
Und in das Heiligtum kann man das Ende der Bösen sehen.
And wicked. Okay, so now, now let's go back to the live stream, because I posted a few quotes there.
So, jetzt gehen wir zum Livestream. Da sind einige Zitaten von Bruder Lorenz da gepostet worden. Also vor das Lied.
We begin with the first one, and that's basically the quotes that we read already this morning in this morning worship.
Und fangen wir das erste an, und das sind im Grunde die Zitaten, die wir bei den Morgenandacht heute schon bereits gelesen haben.
Okay. It says here, the coming of Christ as our high priest to the most holy place for the cleansing of the sanctuary brought to view in Daniel 8:14, the coming of the Son of Man to the Ancient of Days as represented in Daniel 7:13, and the coming of the Lord to his temple foretold by Malachi are descriptions of the same event, and this is also represented by the coming of the bridegroom to the marriage described by Christ in the parable of the 10 virgins of Matthew 25. Okay, so here she links these four different verses together, right?
So hier verbindet sie diese vier verschiedene Versen zusammen.
And where did we mark them this morning?
Und heute Morgen, wo haben wir sie markiert?
Yes, beginning of the 10, right?
Das Anfang des Zehns.
Because here,
The Lord sends light.
yeah, the Lord sends light, right?
Hier der Herr sendet Licht.
And it says here the bridegroom comes to the marriage,
Und
right?
es sagt, dass der Bräutigam zur Hochzeit kommt.
And what are you to do when the bridegroom comes to the marriage?
Und was solltest du tun, wenn der Bräutigam zur Hochzeit kommt?
I mean, you have to heed his call. He's calling you to the marriage.
Right. This marriage call, right? You need to come.
Es gibt dieser Aufruf zur Hochzeit. Du sollst gehorchen und kommen.
Make sure you're on the garment.
Yes, you must make sure you have the garment.
Du musst sicherstellen, dass du den Gewand anhast.
Okay. Maybe this is in the next quote.
Vielleicht ist diese Antwort im nächsten Zitat.
The answer I wanted to have is you must now follow him by faith into the most holy
Also
place.
die
Right?
Antwort, die ich suchte, war, wir mussten ihm durch Glauben ins Allerheiligste folgen.
Okay, so here, so coming of bridegroom.
So hier kommt der Bräutigam.
We read this morning that you've got to be sprinkled
Yes.
with the blood.
Heute Morgen haben wir auch gelesen, dass wir von das Blut besprengt werden müssen.
So enter by faith into most holy place, right?
durch Glaube in das Allerheiligste hineingeht.
Okay, and this is also what Isaiah did, right?
Das ist auch das, was Jesaja tat.
And this is also what Asaph did, right? And then he understood the end of the wicked.
Auch das, was hier Asaf tat. Und dann verstand er das Ende der Bösen.
Okay, so let's go now to the next quote.
So lasst uns jetzt zur nächsten Zitat. Okay.
And this is just linked with what we just read.
Und das ist in Verbindung mit das, was wir soeben gelesen haben.
The same chapter in great contrast.
Dasselbe Kapitel im großen Kapitel.
It says, Christ had come not to the earth as they expected, but as foreshadowed in the type to the most holy place of the temple of God in heaven. He is represented by the prophet Daniel as coming at this time to the Ancient of Days. I saw in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven, and came not to the earth, but to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. This coming is foretold also by the prophet Malachi. The Lord whom ye seek shall suddenly come to his temple, even the messenger of the covenant whom ye delight in. Behold, he shall come, saith the Lord of hosts. So here she speaks then about this coming of the bridegroom, right?
So hier spricht sie über das Kommen des Bräutigams.
Yes, everybody follows?
Jeder folgt?
Because in the first quote she linked this verse with the coming of the bridegroom, right?
Denn in der erste Zitat, sie hat diesen Vers mit das Kommen des Bräutigams verbunden.
Okay. And then it goes on to say,
Dann sagt es weiter.
the coming of the Lord to his temple was sudden, unexpected to his people. They were not looking for him there. So when he comes to the temple, what does he do?
So, wenn er zum Tempel kommt, was tut er?
When Christ came to the temple, literally back then.
So, als Christus damals buchstäblich zum Tempel kam.
Yes, he cleansed the temple.
Er
Right?
hat den Tempel gereinigt.
We understood, right? First temple cleansing, second temple cleansing. Right?
Ersten Tempelreinigung und zweite
So
Tempelreinigung.
the second temple cleansing begins here at the beginning of the 10, right? Which is in the fractal thing here.
Zweite Tempelreinigung beginnt am Anfang des Zehntes und in diesem Fraktal, das wäre hier.
Which is then here. Right?
Was denn hier ist.
So here he comes to his temple suddenly, and now he cleanses it.
Er kommt hier plötzlich zu seinem Tempel und er reinigt.
Put it in the sickle.
Yes, he puts it in
Er
the
tut den Sichel ein.
Okay, and then it goes on to say, so the coming of the Lord to his temple was sudden, unexpected to his people. They were not looking for him there, they expected him to come to earth in flaming fire, taking vengeance on them that know not God, and that obey not the gospel. But the people were not yet ready to meet the Lord. There was still a work of preparation to be accomplished for them. Light was to be given, directing their minds to the temple of God in heaven. So what comes here when he comes?
So, was kommt hier, wenn er hier ankommt?
Light.
Licht.
Right? And it should direct you to
Heaven.
heaven.
He raised his right hand.
Yes, he raised his right hand. Right?
Er hat seine rechten Hand gehoben. Aber es soll deinen Verstand wohin richten?
Yeah, to the temple in heaven, to the sanctuary, right?
Zu das Heiligtum, das Tempel im Himmel.
So this is what Asaph experienced.
Das ist die Erfahrung von Asaph.
And
Yes.
sorry, just a quick point. Go back to Psalm 77, once, the last verse.
Okay, so this here points to heavenly sanctuary.
So dies Licht hier weist auf das himmlischen Heiligtum. Und wir wollen zu den letzten Vers von Psalm 77 gehen.
It says, Thou hast with thine arm redeemed thy people, the sons of Jacob and Joseph Salah.
Würde you read it there?
Psalm 77, okay, maybe it's, oh sorry, verse 15, not the last verse.
Also nicht das letzte Vers, sondern Vers 15.
I can read it again.
It says, Thou hast with thine arm redeemed thy people, the sons of Jacob and Joseph Salah. Because he says before that, Thy way, O the Lord, is in the sanctuary.
Yes.
So, right here, he raises his right arm and he brings light. And this is how he redeems us.
So gerade hier, er hebt seinen rechten Arm empor und er bringt Licht und dadurch erlöst er uns.
And I'm pretty sure when you get to the beginning of that number 10 there, you'll do the same again. That'll be the latter rain.
Und ich bin sicher, dass hier am Anfang dieser Szene hier wird er wieder dasselbe tun, das wird ein Spätregen sein.
Yes.
Because it's always marked in the visions. He raises his right arm and light comes.
In der Vision, das ist markiert, dass er seinen seinen rechten Arm emporhebt und Licht kommt.
Yes. Amen. So and when we come back now because we looked at this, right? He leads you out from the midnight cry down this way. That's the first vision, right?
So der erste Vision von Mitternachtsruf, er führt dich diesen Weg hinaus.
And then here at the 10, he raises his arm and light comes, right?
Und hier an der 10 erhebt er seinen rechten Arm empor und Licht kommt.
But many are then weary and said, yeah, we expected a long time to enter in and they fall off, right?
Aber einige sind ermattet und sie haben gedacht, dass sie viel früher in den Stadt eingekehrt hätten und sie fallen von Weg ab.
So here he raises his right arm and gives his light, therefore the same principle is here.
So hier am Anfang des Szenes erhebt er seinen rechten Arm und gibt Licht und dasselbe Prinzip wäre denn hier.
Yeah, and this would be then he. Right?
Und dies ist auch der Anfang von diesem.
Yes.
Amen.
Okay. So, but it says here,
Aber es sagt weiter hier.
yeah, why must he give this light?
Warum musste er diesen Licht
Because they
geben?
were not ready.
Yes. It says here, but the people were not yet ready to meet the Lord. There was still a work of preparation to be accomplished for them. Light was to be given, directing the minds to the temple of God in heaven. And as they should by faith follow their high priest in his ministration there, new duties would be revealed. Another message of warning and instruction was to be given to the church.
Sorry, there's that quote that says that the former rain was to prepare them for the day of the Lord. All those that neglected the preparation, which was the former rain,
Yes.
would be exactly the same thing here.
Yes.
Also es gibt ein Zitat, wo es sagt, dass das Frühregen soll sich vorbereiten und all diejenigen, die das Frühregen vernachlässigen, dann werden sie
So the point I was just making is that light there would be the parallel to the former
Yes,
rain.
exactly.
so. Der Punkt ist, dass dieses Licht hier wäre denn das Parallel zum Frühregen.
So if you don't prepare, you don't
It's
receive
the-
this.
the
Also
light.
wenn du keine Vorbereitung machst, dann wirst du dies hier nicht erhalten.
Okay. So let's continue.
Lass uns weiter.
Says the prophet, who may abide the day of his coming, and who shall stand when he appeareth? For he is like a refiner's fire, and like fuller's soap, and he shall sit as a refiner and purifier of silver, and he shall purify the sons of Levi, and purge them as gold and silver, that they may offer unto the Lord an offering in righteousness. So she quotes now Malachi 3, verse 2 and 3, and she links it to this coming here, right?
So, sie zitiert Malachi 3, die Verse 2 und 3 und verbindet es mit dieses Kommen hier.
So the coming of the bridegroom to the most holy place.
So
Okay.
das Kommen des Bräutigams zur Allerheiligsten.
So what is he doing in here, therefore?
So was tut er hier?
Purging and purifying.
Yes, he's purging and purifying, right?
Er sichtet und reinigt.
Yes, purging, let's purify.
Why?
Okay, so, and obviously for the whole group he does it until here, but for the first group it's until here.
Natürlich für die gesamte Gruppe, das ist bis da, aber für die erste Gruppe bis hier.
Okay, so and when he has done this work, what are you able then to do?
Und wenn er diesen Werk vollendet hat, für was bist du imstande zu tun? Oder was kannst du denn tun?
Yes, you offer an offering in righteousness.
Du
Okay.
kannst eine Opfergabe in Gerechtigkeit
So
bringen.
and you're finished right here, right?
Und bis hier zu Ende.
So here now you are to offer the
Offering in righteousness.
yes, offering righteousness. Okay.
Eine Opfer in Gerechtigkeit bringen.
Okay. So and who, I mean there are many illustrations, but who specifically was called to offer an offering in righteousness?
Also wer besonders war berufen, eine Opfergabe in
For
Gerechtigkeit zu
whom
bringen.
was it a great test?
So für wen war das eine große Test?
Yes, Abraham. Okay.
Das war Abraham.
So let's turn to Genesis 22.
Lasst uns so 1. Buch Mose 22.
So let's begin in verse 1.
Und wir beginnen im Vers 1.
Or let's begin in verse 1. It says, "And it came to pass after these things that God did tempt Abraham, and said unto him, Abraham, and he said, Behold, here I am." So what did God do to Abraham?
So, was tat Gott zu Abraham?
To tempt him.
Yes, he allowed Satan to tempt him.
Er
Right?
hat Satan erlaubt, ihn zu versuchen.
So the tempter came to him, and what other story we looked at this morning where the tempter comes to God's people?
So, der Versucher kam zu ihm und welche Geschichte haben wir heute Morgen angeschaut, wo der Versucher zu Gottes Volk
Yes,
kommt?
Joshua. Right?
Die von Josu.
So just keep your finger here. Let's go to Zechariah 3.
So, haltet den Platz hier und geht zu Zechariah 3.
And let's begin in verse 1.
Vers 1.
And it says, "And he showed me Joshua the high priest standing before the angel of the Lord, and Satan standing at his right hand to resist him." So this is this work. What does Sister White say? What kind of work is this?
So, was sagt Ellen White? Was für ein Werk ist das?
Of the investigative judgment of the living, right?
Das Untersuchungsgericht an den Lebendigen.
Okay. So, and we understand this begins at the midnight cry.
Wir
Yeah.
verstehen, dass das am Mitternachtsruf
But-
anfängt.
The book of Zechariah marks especially this portion that is here in the tent, right?
Christ comes into Luke.
Buch
Yes.
Zechariah markiert besonders diese Abschnitt davon, die hier in der 10 ist.
Okay. And I don't know where we mark this. No, did we mark it specifically here?
What's that?
Zechariah 3.
Das ist Zechariah 3.
Because it's a parallel.
In a principle.
Yes. Right. Yes. Okay. So this is
Zechariah 3?
Yes.
Yes, in principle.
because this would be this parallel to the midnight cry. Right?
Und dies wäre eine Parallel zur Mitternachtsruf.
Okay. So now he's getting accused here.
So, hier wird er beschuldigt.
Okay. And how is he delivered?
Und wie wird er befreit?
What does it say in verse?
Rebukes.
The Lord rebuke thee.
Let's read verse 2.
Also Vers 2.
And the Lord said unto Satan, The Lord rebuke thee, O Satan, even the Lord that hath chosen Jerusalem rebuke thee. Is not this a brand plucked out of the fire? So when somebody is plucked out of the fire, what does it illustrate?
Also wenn jemand aus dem Feuer herausgepflückt ist, was stellt es dar?
Like the 3 worthies.
Saved by the skin of your teeth.
Yeah, it's just in the very last moment, yeah, you're just saved. Okay.
Es ist in der allerletzte Sekunde bist du gerettet.
We also made mention of 1 Peter chapter 4, the righteous is being saved scarcely, right?
So,
Scarcely.
wir haben auch erwähnt, 1. Petrus 4, dass die Gerechte barely,
Mit knapp.
So eben gerade so.
eben gerade, also knapp errettet sind.
It says you got to hold on right unto the end in order
Yes.
to be saved.
Es sagt, du musst festhalten bis zur Ende, um errettet zu werden.
Because here we understand this is where Jesus will say, the Lord rebukes thee,
So,
right?
es ist gerade hier, dass wir verstehen, wo der Herr sagen wird, der Herr schelte dich.
And then you have these 3 changes.
Und dann gibt es diese 3 Wechsel, die Josua hat hier.
And his rebuke is when he's going to fulfill his promise, right?
Yes.
Und sein Tadel ist, wenn er seine Verheißung erfüllt.
So Satan rebuked.
Satan wird hier getadelt.
And in many ways, Satan is Pharaoh, is the south, right?
Also Satan in vieler Hinsicht ist Pharao, diesen Südmacht.
So he's not just rebuking him in the sense like Christ talking to Satan. He's also rebuking this Satan's power on earth, right?
Yes.
This doing all these things and getting away with it. This is what he's talking to the sanctuary. I saw them and how they prosper, and he's just going to rebuke him, right?
Also es ist nicht, als wenn Gott nur zu Satan sagt, ich schelte dich, sondern es wird
All his agents.
all seine Agenten, also es wird ausgeführt werden.
Yes. Because when we turn to Isaiah chapter 2,
Denn wenn wir zu Jesaja Kapitel 2 gehen,
let's read verse 10 to 12.
Die Verse 10 bis 12. Jesaja 2, 10 bis 12.
It says, "Enter into the rock and hide thee in the dust for fear of the Lord and for the glory of his majesty. The lofty looks of man shall be humbled, and the haughtiness of man shall be bowed down, and the Lord alone shall be exalted in that day. For the day of the Lord of hosts shall be upon every one that is proud and lofty, and upon every one that is lifted up, and he shall be brought low." So who alone will be exalted
So,
when the day of the Lord comes?
wer ist der Einzige, der erhöht wird am Tag des Herrn?
The Lord alone, right?
Der Herr allein.
So we will humble everybody.
Er wird jeden demütigen.
And even the righteous, like Isaiah, say, "Woe is me."
Selbst
Okay.
den Gerechten, wie Jesaja. Wer ist mir?
Everybody will be humbled, but the difference will be some will repent and can be exalted, and others will resist and will be destroyed.
So, jeder wird gedemütigt werden. Der einzige Unterschied ist, einige werden Buße tun und werden dann erhöht und einige werden widerstehen und zerstört werden.
Okay, so now let's go back to Genesis 22.
So, lasst uns zurückgehen zu 1. Buch Mose 22.
Genesis 22.
1. Mose 22.
Because we read in Malachi, right, that the Lord comes to purge and to purify us in this time.
Wir haben gelesen in Malachi, der Herr kommt, um zu reinigen und zu sichten in dieser Zeit,
That we might offer an offering in righteousness.
damit
Right?
wir eine Opfergabe in Gerechtigkeit hier aufopfern.
And Abraham will see he's to offer now an offering in righteousness. Same story.
Abraham, wie wir sehen werden, er soll eine Opfergabe in Gerechtigkeit aufopfern.
And we also saw
dasselbe Geschichte.
in the story of Zechariah that he gets tempted by Satan. Right?
Wir haben auch in der Geschichte von Zechariah gesehen, dass
Joshua,
Josua versucht wird hier.
And also here we see in Genesis 21 verse 1 that Satan tempted Abraham. Okay.
Und hier können wir sehen in 1. Buch Mose 22, Vers 1, dass Satan den Abraham versuchte.
So the same story, right?
Dasselbe Geschichte.
Okay. So let's read verse again in verse 1.
Also wieder Kapitel
Therefore, I
22,
want to
Vers
suggest
1.
that this test is speaking about this test that we have to face now before he gives us the everlasting covenant as he gave to Abraham. Okay.
So, ich möchte vorschlagen, dass dieser Test, die Abraham hindurchgeht, ist dieser Test, die wir hindurchgehen oder gerade bevorstehen, hindurchzugehen, hier noch bevor wir die Verheißung des Bundes
It's
erhalten.
the test of Joshua and the test of giving the right offering. Okay.
Das ist der Test Josuas und auch das Test, der richtige Opfergabe darzubringen.
Okay, let's read this.
Lass uns das lesen.
And it came to pass after these things that God did tempt Abraham and said unto him, Abraham, and he said, Behold, here I am. And he said, Take now thy son, thine only son, Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I will tell thee of. So what type of offering was he to bring?
So, was für eine Opfer sollte er bringen?
A burnt offering.
Ein Brandopfer.
So this offering in righteousness is a burnt offering.
Also diese Opfergabe in Gerechtigkeit ist ein Brandopfer.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
So-
ein gebrochenes Herz.
Psalms 51,
Psalm
Vers-
51,
verse 17,
Vers 17.
it says, The offering of the Lord is a broken and contrite heart.
Die
Right?
Opfergabe des Herrn ist eine gebrochene und gedemütigte Herz.
So this is what he wants from us.
Das ist das, was der Herr von uns möchte.
And let's continue.
Lass uns weiterlesen.
And Abram rose up early in the morning and saddled his ass, and took 2 of his young men with him, and Isaac his son, and clave the wood for the burnt offering, and rose up and went unto the place of which God had told him. Then on the 3rd day Abram lifted up his eyes and saw the place afar off. Okay, so I would suggest, that these 3 days are in here.
So, ich würde vorschlagen, dass diese 3 Tage hier drin sind.
Okay. 1, 2, and the 3rd day leads you to the beginning of this 10 here.
Der dritte Tag führt zum Anfang dieses Szenes.
So, and what does he do here?
Und was tut er hier? Lifts up his
He
eyes.
lifts up his eyes.
Er
Right?
hebt seine Augen empor.
So, in the beginning of this 10, what does Zechariah, for instance, always do?
Und am Anfang dieses Szenen, was tut Zachariah zum Beispiel, was tut er immer?
He
Lifts
was
his eyes.
lifts up his eyes,
Er
right?
hebt seine Augen empor.
So, it would be the same principle.
No,
Just
we
in
had
this
it there in Judges 19, the wayfaring, the man sees the way, he lifts up his eyes and
Ah,
sees
yes,
so it's
yes,
right
yes.
there.
Im Richter 19, das ist auch hier, also diesen Mann auf der langen Reise, der sieht ihn kommen und hebt seine Augen empor.
lifts up eyes.
So, hebt den Augen empor.
Okay, Fyodor?
There will also be a parallel to Abigail, right?
Das wäre auch eine Parallel zu Abigail. Frage.
The midnight cry, you know, when she saddles the ass and hates toward David, you know, and she brings this offering to him.
Yes.
Also wie sie den Esel packt und zu David kommt und ihm diesen Opfer bringt.
Yes, so the midnight cry to hear. He also hear the midnight cry to hear.
Also der Mitternachtsruf bis zu Anfang des Szenes wäre in diesem Fraktal von hier bis hier.
Yes.
It's also interesting that he takes two men with him. So you've got two men and Isaac the sacrifice, and Abraham lifts up his eyes.
Yes, it's just three men, it's a symbol.
No, I mean Isaac would be then Christ perfectly, right?
you get
Perfect,
the Father,
perfect
the Son, and
sacrifice.
the two anointed ones.
Yes. So Isaac wäre dann also in der perfekten Sinne Christus mit den zwei Dienern, den zwei Engeln.
Okay, so let's continue, verse 5.
So Vers 5.
And Abram said unto his young man, Abide ye here with the ass, and I and the lad will go yonder and worship and come again to you. And Abram took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it upon Isaac, his son. And he took the fire in his hand and a knife, and they went both of them together. And Isaac spake unto Abram his father, and said, My father. And he said, Here am I, my son. And he said, Behold the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering? And Abram said, My son, God will provide himself a lamb for a burnt offering. So they went both of them together. So what did Abram do here?
So was tat Abraham hier?
He basically said God will provide this offering.
Er
Right?
sagte, Gott wird diesen Opfergabe
Okay.
bereitgeben.
So now let's just continue reading.
Vers
So-
9.
And they came to the place which God had told him of, and Abram built an altar there, and laid the wood in order, and bound Isaac his son, and laid him on the altar upon the wood. So what did Abram do?
Tat Abraham hier?
He built an altar, right?
Einen Altar aufgerichtet.
Just like Elijah, when he comes to the beginning of this 10, right?
So wie Elia, wenn er
Also-
zum Anfang dieses Szenes kommt,
Begins to build an altar there.
er baut einen Altar auf.
In verse 10,
Vers 10.
And Abram stretched forth his hand and took the knife to slay his son. And the angel of the Lord called him out of heaven and said, Abram, Abram. And he said, Here am I. And he said, Lay not thine hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything unto him. For now I know that thou fearest God, seeing thou hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, from me. So how was he delivered?
So wie ist er befreit?
Scarcely, right? Or scarcely.
So gerade mal. So eben.
He was like a like a brand plucked out of the fire.
Er
Right?
war wie diese
Feuerscheid.
Feuerscheite aus dem Feuer gepflückt.
Okay, and now it says here,
Und jetzt sagt es,
And Abram lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold behind him a ram caught in a thicket by his horns. And Abram went and took the ram and offered him up for a burnt offering in the stead of his son. So what I want to suggest is,
was ich denn damit vorschlagen
he
möchte.
lifts up his eyes here at the beginning,
Er hebt seine Augen empor hier am Anfang.
and now he's fully delivered, and he lifts up his eyes here again at the end.
Ist er vollständig befreit und er hebt seine Augen hier am Ende ein weiteres Mal auf.
Lifts up eyes.
So hebt seine Augen empor.
And what is he now offering up here
Und was
instead of his
opfert
son?
er hier auf anstelle von seinem Sohn? Perfect offering.
No, what is it?
The ram.
Yes, the ram,
It's
right?
ein Widder.
Okay, so now let's go to
Okay, I get the pattern's the same, so I'm not so much fussed about it, but I would have put this back at the midnight cry, this whole scenario. Because the midnight cry is where you get tempted, you got these 3 days, takes you down, you lift up your eyes there at the beginning, you build in the altar, right? And at the end, he offers Isaac, right? And then it's when the Lord provides the sacrifice. I get the idea why you're putting the principles in there, but I wouldn't take this story and do it like that. Because when you got the 5, right, you get to the end, it's marking what he says it is done. We marked that already this morning. When you get to the beginning of that number 10 there, it's done.
Mhm.
Whereas you've got to now coming into there and now given the altar, but the altar's already been done at that point. When he says, the Lord rebuke thee, take away the filthy garment, you're being filled with the Holy Spirit right there. So you're not doing anything more in there, you've already done it. So everything you've laid out, there's nothing wrong with it, but it just begins at the midnight cry. It's the same as 1 Samuel 25, it's the exact parallel. That's how we've put it in there before. And so, because we know the midnight cry, Satan tempts his people, and then you've got 3 days, and we've got many illustrations of these 3 days that leads you down, and the 10 is the 3rd day, lifts up his eyes, and then you build the altar. It's in accordance, that's what you're doing, and you're building the temple. And you come down to that waymark there, and that's where he accepts the offering. And the next waymark is where he puts it on this offering, this wicked one. Get the point? Because you're trying to jam all this in there in this little end piece, but
I want to show the application for us in our time.
But that is the application for us. All the stories point to this point, right? Your final temptation begins at the midnight cry.
Yes, but what I want to show is that will be our experience now.
Okay, but I'm not denying this fact, but you have to take this story. You can't take this story and say that's the application of this story, because it's not. And what I'm saying is, when you get to the beginning of that 10, right? So you're putting it there, right? You go back to that story there, right? It says, verse 4, on the 3rd day Abraham lifted up his eyes and he saw the place far off, and now he's going to pick up the cross and he's going to make the sacrifice. But if you take the other stories, when you get to that line there, he says it is done. That's like a contradiction. You can't be now making a sacrifice, because the Lord rebukes Satan right there, right? Because you've already made the sacrifice.
No, this is where you must offer this offering in righteousness. But this is what we looked in Malachi. Right, he purges you here and purifies you, that you can now bring the perfect offering.
No, I'm saying, no, I don't believe that. The offering, right, when you get, count those 5 days, the 5th day, that's when you're that offering. And from that point forward, what he does is he changes you now.
This is where you offer the perfect offering.
And then when you get that line there, you've finished it, you've made the offering. Now he can fill you with the Spirit. That's those 3 changes.
Yes, I marked it here, right? You offer now the offering in righteousness.
But you're not offering. Offering means it's a process. You're now doing something. It's not. You've already offered. That's what I'm saying. On the 5th day, he gets to the end of that 5th day and he says it's done. Yes. The offering has been presented, right? So when you come to that point, he says, take away the filthy garments and change him right there.
What I mean is, for instance, right? We have Isaiah. Right, we have holy, holy, holy.
Yes.
Right, and then he says, "Woe's me" at the very end. Yes.
Yes.
So this is now when he gives this perfect offering to the Lord. This is the perfect sin offering and
but if
the perfect burnt offering.
I'm not arguing that, but when you follow the pattern, right, it's before you get to that waymark. Because when you get to that waymark, he says it is done. When he said it's done, you can't offer an offering after that point.
No, it's right at this waymark.
Look, Lawrence, you're making silly arguments there. That's just semantics. When you get to that waymark, it's done.
Yes.
That's the point I'm making.
But my point is, this is right there. When you give the perfect offering, he immediately says it is done.
Okay, but that's not what you're showing in this story.
No.
You're saying he's lifting up his eyes there. Now he's going to put the wood on himself. Now he's going to march up. And now he's going to do all these things. That's not sound like something's done there.
Oh, but that's happening here. And then he's delivered.
Lawrence, you're contradicting yourself. I'm saying you're digging a hole. and I don't want to argue it. What I'm saying is principally all the things are right, but if you just go back to the Midnight Cry and lay it out from there, you'll see it'll fit there perfectly. Because the Midnight Cry is the point where our final test is. It's where Satan comes and tempts us, and that's what happens here right at the beginning. And you're going to get yourself stuck by putting that in there now because you're going to make a contradiction.
I mean, if the pattern is the same, then it must be there also. Okay, so
Look, what I'm trying to get the point, you have to take this little 10 there now, and you have to open up this 10, right, and make another fractal completely to show that. But what I'm saying, the other one shows this point. When if you look at those 5 days, you get to that point, he says right there, it is done. At the beginning of the 10, just like at the beginning of this 10, what does he say in Revelation 16? It is done, right? It's finished, right? So you can't now make another work after that point. That's the argument I'm making, right? So can't take this illustration, which is really the proper fulfillment of it from the Midnight Cry forward, and now stick it in there. You're contradicting yourself.
I mean, if I can just make one point, Sister White marks the point where Abraham lifts his hand and mark it with the 9th hour where Christ says it is done, right? So, so before he basically says it is done, he builds the altar, correct?
Mhm.
Yes.
So, but if my understanding is totally correct, then it's in the 10 where you have the 3 changes of Zechariah, right? And one of them is the blotting out of sin, which is, it is done. So, the way how I also would understand it's right at the beginning of the 10, which would hold the pattern when he says it is done.
I'm not fighting against the pattern, okay? And therefore,
We've taken this story before, and we've laid it on there.
yeah,
From the
I
Midnight Cry
don't
forward.
disagree with that, but I know that still the pattern must also hold true in the small factors. So
Not this illustration. Leviticus 16, right? Leviticus.
okay, then all right. I don't want to discuss now. We can just place it here at the moment.
Okay, let me ask you.
and then-
No. Don't make arguments like that, right? Because if you're going to make arguments, I'll just make an argument against it, right? When you go to this group at the top, right? The first fractal is for one group, right? The second fractal is for a different group. So if you make that argument and you bring down here, this second fractal here, if you're going to do that, from this line in the middle forward, would be for a different group of people.
That's what I mean, a group here and a group there, that's what I was meaning.
Yes, and it's not, we don't have 2 groups in there, right? That's what you would have to have in order to make that fit that way, right? But we don't, right? So the group that's been tested there has been tested with the Midnight Cry, and this brings it to the end, right? I don't know why you would make an argument against that.
Again, I'm certain that. Okay, doesn't matter. I don't want to detract now from the thought I want to highlight actually, because that's actually what's happening at the moment. So, okay, so then we just apply it now from the Midnight Cry just to have no arguments.
Also diese Geschichte wenden wir von der Mitternachtsruf an, weil es ist eine Kontenz zwischen, wir haben das früher hier angelegt und jetzt wollen wir es hier anlegen, und Bruder Mark macht der Argument, dass wenn wir diese Geschichte hier anlegen würden, dann würde das heißen, dass hier drin ist eine Gruppe und hier drin ist eine andere Gruppe, und das können wir nicht. Aber I mean, there's a lot more that
You
we said.
don't need to say that, you'd have to go and explain it, just deal with it, just let him go through it now.
I also don't agree with that argument, but it doesn't matter. So let's go back to the story.
So, lasst uns zu der Geschichte zurück.
Because the point I wanted to make is that it says here he lifted up his eyes at the beginning and he lifts up his eyes here at the end. Right?
Also der letzte Punkt, den ich gemacht habe, ist, dass er am Anfang seine Augen aufhebt und aber auch am Ende.
Okay, and at the end, now it says here in verse 13,
Vers 13 sagt es.
and Abram lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him a ram caught in a thicket by his horns. And Abram went and took the ram and offered him up for a burnt offering instead of his son. So, this is now a burnt offering made in place of Isaac, right?
Das hier ist ein Brandopfer an der Stelle Isaaks.
and we studied this in conjunction with the scapegoat. Right?
Wir haben das in Zusammenhang mit dem Verständnis der
So
Sündenbock.
keep your finger here in Genesis. Let's go to Isaiah 43.
So, halte den Platz hier im 1. Buch Mose, geht zu Jesaja 43.
And let's read verse 3 and 4.
Und wir lesen die Versen 3 und 4.
It says, For I am the Lord thy God, the Holy One of Israel, thy Saviour. I gave Egypt for thy ransom, and Ethiopia and Seba for thee. Since thou wast precious in my sight, thou hast been honourable, and I have loved thee. Therefore will I give man for thee, and people for thy life. So what does it say here? What does the Lord do?
So, was sagt es hier? Was tut der Herr? He gives you a substitute.
Yes, he gives a ransom, right?
Gibt ein Ransom.
Ein Lösegeld.
Lösegeld. Ja, okay, ein Lösegeld.
And who is the ransom in this illustration?
Und in dieser Darstellung, wer ist der Lösegeld?
Egypt,
So,
yes.
Ägypten.
Okay. And when we go also to Proverbs 21 verse 18,
Und wenn wir zu Sprüche 21, 18 gehen,
says the wicked shall be a ransom for the righteous, and the transgressor for the upright. Okay, so who's the ransom for the righteous?
so wer ist der Lösegeld für den Gerechten?
The wicked, right?
Der Bösen.
Okay. And in Genesis 22,
Just a minute, where did you read it?
Proverbs 21 verse 18. Okay. And in Genesis 22 we saw it was the ram, right?
Und im 1. Buch Mose 22, wir haben gesehen, es war der Widder.
Okay. So, and who's the ram in Bible prophecy?
In der biblischen Prophetie, wer ist der Widder?
2-1.
The two-horned beast,
Der
right?
zweihörnige
Daniel
Tier.
chapter 8, okay.
Daniel Kapitel 8.
So, and also just in this illustration, who gets slain here?
Und
Okay.
auch in dieser Darstellung, wer wird hier geschlachtet?
The Medo-Persian, the two.
Medo-Persien,
ram,
der
right?
zweihörnige Macht.
Yes.
Amen.
Okay. So, and how was the ram offered up?
Und wie würde der Widder aufgeopfert? Also Brandopfer.
Yes, it's a burnt offering.
Sein
Right?
Brandopfer.
So,
But it's also like a knife is raised above it. It's like above Jerusalem. There was this angel standing with a sword raised.
Also dieses Messer war über es gehoben, das ist wie über Jerusalem, diese Engel mit dem gezogenen Schwert.
okay, so, and we saw that when you go into the sanctuary, you will see the end of the wicked.
Und wir haben
Right?
gesehen, dass wenn du in ein Heiligtum gehst, du wirst das Ende der Bösen sehen.
Okay, and basically the end of the wicked is that they will be burnt up, right?
Das Ende der Bösen ist, dass sie verbrannt werden.
Okay, let's just finish with these closing thoughts. Let's go back to the live stream and let's read this quote that I posted by Stephen Haskell, CIS.
So, lasst uns zur Livestream gehen und diesen Zitat von Stephen Haskell lesen. Das ist CIS.
Yes, it says beginning with no sacrifice.
An mit kein Opfergabe. Kein Opfer.
Okay. No sacrifice was ever slain within the sanctuary, but the offerings were slain in the court, and the blood and flesh were carried within the sanctuary by the priests. So where were all the offerings slain?
So, wo waren alle Opfergaben geschlachtet?
In the court.
In
Yes.
den Vorhof.
Okay. And then it says, Christ, the great antitypical sacrifice, was slain in the antitypical court, this earth. So he also understands the court represents the earth, right?
Er versteht hier auch, dass der Vorhof das Erde darstellt.
and then entered the antitypical sanctuary in the heavens with his own blood and the same body in which he bore our sins on Calvary. Sins are forgiven and are blotted out from the books in the heavenly sanctuary, but they are not destroyed there. Just in the type, the fires of the brazen altar in the court consumed that which in type represented sin. So what was consumed on the altar of sacrifice?
Was würde verzehrt am Brandopferaltar?
Yes, that what illustrates sins, right?
Das, was Sünden darstellt.
Yeah, so it was in the court, which is the earth, right?
Das war im Vorhof, was der Erde ist.
So just as in the type, the fires of the brazen altar in the court consumed that which in type represented sin, so in the antitype the wicked will be on the breadth of the earth when fire comes down from God out of heaven and devours them. So how were the sacrifices consumed?
So, wie waren die Opfern verzehrt?
By
Durch
fire, right?
Durch Feuer.
And so will also the wicked will be consumed by fire.
Und so werden
Okay.
die Bösen auch mit Feuer verzehrt.
Okay, this earth is the great antitypical court, where all the work typified in the court of the earthly sanctuary will meet its fulfillment. The constant burning upon the altar of that which typified sin caused an accumulation of ashes. The priests in the earthly sanctuary served unto the example and shadow of heavenly things, and even the removal of ashes was directed of the Lord to be done in a manner to typify a portion of the final work of Christ. The priest was to be clothed in the pure white linen garments when he removed the ashes from the altar. The ashes were first taken up by the priest and placed beside the altar on the east side. When the time came to remove them from beside the altar, the priest laid aside his priestly robes and put on other garments. Then he carried the ashes forth without the camp and poured them out in a clean place. Ashes are all that will remain of sin. The devil and sinners, after the fires of the last day have finished their work, when the purifying fires of the Lord have removed the last trace of sin, there will appear a new earth, a clean place, without one taint of sin upon it. And as the righteous walk over the face of the clean, pure earth, the ashes of sin and all that clung to sin in this earth will be under their feet. Truly, the type will then have met its antitype, and the ashes of sin will be in a clean place. So, what was left of all the sin?
So, was ist von aller Sünde übrig geblieben?
Only the ashes, right?
Nur die Asche.
Okay, so basically what the Lord wants to show us, both externally and internally,
So, das, was der Herr uns zeigen möchte, ist sowohl extern als auch intern.
when we bring this righteous offering here at the end,
So, wenn wir diese gerechte Opfer am Ende bringen,
it is then that He can take now the wicked and place them in our stead.
ist es gerade dann, wenn er die Bösen nehmen kann und an unsere Stelle setzen.
And He will then devour them by fire.
Und
Okay.
er wird sie dann mit Feuer verzehren.
Okay. So what I wanted to show is basically, because the Bible says also we are to be a burnt sacrifice, right?
Der Bibel sagt, dass wir ein Brandopfer werden sollen.
Okay, so it's an illustration of both. It's an illustration of the righteous that are fully consumed for God's service, but when you cling to sin, this is actually a judgment when you're burnt up to
Das
ashes.
ist
Okay.
eine Darstellung von beides. Also wir werden völlig verzehrt zur Dienst des Herrn hin. Aber wenn du Sünde festhältst, dann wirst du vollständig verzehrt.
Okay, so and this is what Asaph saw in the sanctuary. Okay,
Und dies ist, was Asaph in das Heiligtum sah.
he saw the end of the wicked. He saw how they were to be consumed, to be only ashes, to be trodden under feet.
Er hat das Ende der Bösen gesehen. Der hat gesehen, dass sie nur als Asche werden, unter Fuß niedergetreten zu werden.
And this ram also represents the nations, as we saw.
Und
Right?
diese Widder stellt auch die Nationen dar, wie wir gesehen haben.
He gives Egypt as a ransom.
Und er gibt Ägypten als ein Lösegeld.
So let's just finish maybe in Psalms 72. 3.
Lass uns den Psalm 73 beenden.
And I tell you, brothers and sisters, this is a very important link, though I don't fully see every connection yet, but I can see the connection in it. This is something we really need to understand more
Liebe
fully.
Geschwister, obwohl ich das nicht vollständig verstehe, ich kann genug sehen, um zu sagen, dass das eine sehr wichtige Verbindung ist hier. Und wir müssen es eben
So
verstehen.
let's read verse 17 to down to verse, I don't know, I will just stop.
Also wir fangen wieder in Vers 17 an und lesen.
It says, "Until I went into the sanctuary of God, then understood I their end. Surely thou didst set them in slippery places, thou castest them down into destruction. How are they brought into desolation as in a moment? They are utterly consumed with terrors." So it says here, yeah, they will be consumed.
Es sagt hier, sie werden verzehrt.
As a dream when one awaketh, so, O Lord, when thou awakest, thou shalt despise their image. Okay, so
Das ist Vers 20.
when the Lord awakes,
Also wenn der Herr erweckt,
he will act and he will bring down this fire to consume the burnt sacrifice. And if the burnt sacrifice is with sin, with spot on it, then you will be brought down to ashes. Okay.
wenn der Herr erwacht, dann wird er Feuer vom Himmel herabbringen. Und wenn du Sünde festhältst, dann wirst du zur Asche verzehrt.
But if your offering is without spot or wrinkle, you will be consumed as a sweet odor unto the Lord. Okay.
Aber wenn dein Opfer ohne Makel ist, dann wirst du verzehrt, so ein süßes Wohlgeruch zum Herrn.
Okay. And we saw the wicked internally, but also the nations is illustrated by this ram. They will both be destroyed.
Wir haben
Okay.
gesehen, die Bösen intern, aber auch die Nationen dargestellt durch diese Widder sollen beides verzehrt werden.
Okay, I hope that you could see some of these links. Okay.
So, ich hoffe, dass ihr einige von diesen Verbindungen sehen konntet.
And as I said, this will be a very important link as we will go on with our studies.
Das ist eine sehr wichtige Verbindung, wenn wir fortfahren mit unserem Studium,
Amen.
damit einzubeziehen. Amen.
Okay. Then let's close with our prayer round.
Lass uns mit Gebet schließen.